I'm jamming a little bit. Lindsay, can you hear that music when it's like in the countdown ticker?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. It's kind of a fun. I'm going to get sick of it eventually because it's like the same countdown ticker I use every time, but it kind of gets me warmed up. It's like being in the green room and they've got like all your favorite hits playing, but there's like the one song. So good morning, Lindsay. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing really great. Thank you. And I'm so excited. The day is finally here. I feel like this was like months and months ago when we talked about doing a live, but I'm really looking forward to having a chance to chat with you today.
Thanks. Me too.
Great. Well, before we get started, I just want to say welcome to everybody who is watching us today. And whether you're watching on LinkedIn, maybe you're watching us on Facebook, maybe you're watching us on YouTube, I would love it if you could please drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from and realistically where in the household you're watching from, because we're all pretty much working from home these days. And when you do that, it does two things. One is it lets us know you're watching. And for me, kind of selfishly, guys, I like to know like the technology's working, because sometimes I have little hiccups between broadcasting it, pushing it out from StreamYard, and it landing on the network. So when you comment, I'm like, yay, it's working. You know, I can kind of see you guys out there. And then what I will do is I'll start to pull in some of your comments on screen so I can see, like this one, it just says LinkedIn user. It's probably an anonymous profile, or maybe you have some privacy settings in place there, but I can see it's on LinkedIn, so I kind of feel good about things that are out there. So very excited to get the conversation started here today. And I want to tell you guys a little bit of background. So this is my interview series. It's kind of like a live podcast almost. And I bring people on the show to talk about interesting, informative, or educational topics. And Lindsay and I, we've actually never met in person, but we are both members of an organization called Together Digital. I've been involved for, I want to say, going on about 2.5 years. How about you, Lindsay? Do you remember how long you've been involved?
I want to say it's probably about year and a half, 2 years.
Okay. And you're out in Indianapolis, is that correct?
Yes, part of the indie squad out here.
Yeah, awesome. And so background on this, guys, is I'm always kind of combing my network looking for other people to bring into my show. And I put an ask out, and we have a Slack channel for Together Digital. I put an ask on the Slack channel, and I said, hey, I do this fun show, Social Media Pie, my live interview series. And I said, who wants to be on the show? And I had a couple of people reach out to me. Lindsay was one of them. And I always kind of screen people. So I looked at her profile, you know, had a little bit of a conversation. And then I said, yeah, let's have this chat. Let's do this. So Lindsay, when I booked you, I said, what do you want to talk about? And you said, hey, let's talk about digital agility, the tech revolution that empowers employees. So before we get into that conversation, why don't you, if you could, take a few minutes, tell us a little bit about who are you, Lindsay, and what's your business all about as well?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching today. Lindsey McGuire. As a professional person, I am in content marketing. I'm the content marketing manager at FormStack, where I actually celebrate 2 years in about a month. It's crazy.
Congratulations.
I have a pretty varied background industry-wise. I actually started my professional career with a credit union in content marketing. Once I moved to Indianapolis, transitioned to nonprofit work, and then now I'm in tech. So a very kind of mix of things from my background, but I've always been in content marketing. I've always been interested in writing and telling stories, and touching base with all the people who are part of our target market and who's wanting to use our products and services. But as far as me, I am in Indianapolis, very proud to be an Indianapolis resident now. Been here almost 4 years. Really love it. As far as my job at FormStack, like I said, content marketing manager. So writing every day, managing our blog and kind of helping along with any content needs. We just launched a new website, so that was a really cool project to be a part of. And then I also produced the Ripple Effect podcast for FormStack.
Oh, very cool. And I'm going to pull your website up on screen. I want to make sure I have the right one, right? Is this at formstack.com?
That's right.
Awesome. So website launches, man, that is a painful process. That's like birthing a baby, right? Going through that process.
Yeah, it takes a lot of all hands on deck moments. I mean, this has been in fruition for probably, 9, 10 plus months, as far as going from actual idea to wireframes to conception to dev and all the things in between. So the last 2 months has definitely been just so much work, but so much great work. And to be able to work with all of my teammates across our marketing team was just such a great experience. And we're very lucky at FormStack that they see the value in marketers and marketing. So we have a very, very large marketing team. There's nearly 30 marketers at FormStack, and we're about 250 employees total. So it's really nice to have that many people to collaborate with and to work with to produce something like this. I mean, it's just such a step forward for us as not only a product, but kind of being more of this platform vision of being not only an online forms provider, but now we're forms, workflows, document generation, electronic signatures, the whole kind of kit and caboodle.
Very cool. And I kind of think about when we launch a website, it reminds me a little bit like if you've ever, if you bought a house, when you go through that process of getting your first mortgage, and then you're sitting at the table and you're signing your paperwork, and then you get your first mortgage statement in your mail, and you're like, oh, it's the mortgage, it's arrived, and then you're excited. And then the second month, you're like, oh, it's not quite as exciting. And then if you ever go through the process of moving again, and your second house, going through that process of getting a mortgage is not as exciting because it's a painful process going through moving. But it is certainly, a necessity of business these days. And I've heard people saying, having a website, it's kind of like your second front door. And nowadays, realistically, Lindsay, it's probably your first front door, right? It's the place that people go first to check you out before deciding whether to do business with you.
It's really funny you bring that up. One of our salespeople, Ryan Thompson, just wrote a blog post we're launching next week. He actually talks about the importance of healthcare providers to be creating digital front doors for their patients. So just as a really funny connection that you bring up that ideal.
Yeah. Well, we are definitely in a digital world, guys. And, wow, now more than ever, because of the fact that so many things have changed due to COVID, where we used to network in person. And Lindsay, did you ever go to any of the Together Digital National Conferences? Were you ever at those in person?
No, I wasn't able to attend the one last year. And it's just sad because, obviously we're not going to have that opportunity in person this year.
We will eventually. And the good thing is it's a membership organization. It's for women who work in various areas of digital and marketing. And there's a lot of consultants, there's agency, corporate employees who are part of the group. But the good thing is, as a digital organization, we were able to pivot pretty quickly from in-person events, conferences, workshops, and things like that to webinars and Zoom calls and things like that. But the reality is, none of us knew at the beginning of this year, right, Lindsay, that this was going to be happening, this whole digital shift. But here we are, right? And so when I asked Lindsay to come on the show with me, guys, I said, what do you want to talk about? And she said, let's talk about digital agility, the tech revolution that empowers employees. So Lindsay, why is it important for us to kind of understand what this means? And, for folks that are watching, why is this important for all of them?
Yeah, of course. So digital agility really encompasses the ability to adapt and pivot and, all the buzzwords we've been talking about lately with the pandemic and having to be completely digital and completely remote. But being able to quickly adapt your processes and your technology and your processes and systems to be able to adapt to the needs of not only your business, but kind of the atmosphere around you and what's happening in the world around you, and not have to so heavily rely on your IT team or your tech team or your compliance team or the people who are kind of doing those parts of your work. And being able to rapidly and in real time make edits or changes or try to figure out what you can do yourself to fix whatever has broken or whatever's not being as efficient as you want it to be.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting how, we used to, you would outsource things to people, or you'd have a whole department doing these things for you. And as organizations start to get more nimble, more efficient, then you're wearing many hats. You're wearing many hats. You're doing marketing plus technology and website design and form creation and all these things that you had talked about earlier. So really understanding that, I love the term digital agility, and being agile is being efficient, right, in business nowadays.
Yes, and it's just ensuring that you have the power to be able to kind of map your own destiny and create those solutions to your problems, and not having to be delayed or bottlenecked or just run into those issues that we all have had in the workplace. And on top of that, and with COVID, of course, this has rapidly come to market, but being able to do those in-person or paper processes in a digital way that a lot of places had never even thought about before. I mean, it's really kind of magical to watch kind of the gears shift and people start to realize, like, I don't have to do it the way I've always done it.
Right. And that's interesting because there's so many employers that, even prior to COVID happening, were really resistant to the work from home movement. No, we have to have our people here where we can see them. And I want to be able to walk down to the hall to the IT department and say, hey, I'm having a problem with my server. This web page isn't working. And lo and behold, COVID swept through and we had to kind of quickly change gears, figure out how to get people set up to work from home. And it wasn't, at the time, that some employers are starting to come back a little bit, but at the time we had to everybody had to work from home. So we had to figure out, and your theme here, you talk about empowering employees. We had to be able to trust and empower employees, right? So what are some of the challenges that you've seen that people have had to go through? And then what is your advice for them as they start to kind of empower their employees for this?
Yeah, I think the trust thing is huge. The respect thing, of course, is huge. And being able to understand that you hire people to do a job and you need to trust them to be able to do that job and to figure out the way that best fits the solution to the problem. You're not hiring people to tell them what to do. You're hiring them so they can bring in new perspectives and new innovations and creative thinking and bring in something fresh and new and different, and figuring out ways to let that blossom instead of stifling it. And I think the fact that everyone has been forced to go remote has really put the focus on this, and an understanding of, if we just let people have the tools that allow them to kind of discover or innovate or create things that might have been in the back of their heads but have never been possible before, it just unlocks like crazy possibilities.
Yeah, interesting. And were you guys working from home before at your company, or were you an all hands on deck in person type of an organization?
Yeah, so we have kind of a really interesting layout. We're a hybrid company, so we call ourselves remote first. So 60% of our workforce is remote, 100% fully remote.
Wow. Okay.
All over the world, not even just the country, but we have employees in Europe and in South America and Canada and the US. I think we have about 180 US cities now with form stackers in them. So that's really cool. But yeah, we've been that way nearly a decade, I want to say. And that came because our CEO, Chris Byers, just realized that if we just loosen this up and we allow people to work from wherever they are most efficient, from wherever they want to be, then productivity will skyrocket. Their happiness will skyrocket. And it's just a best of both worlds scenario for everybody. It's empowered us to find really great employees. And I mean, if you watch me on LinkedIn, I'm always talking about how much I love my employees, and not my employees, but FormStack employees. And we're just able to build the best team possible because we're not secured by locations. We do have 2 office locations. We have Indianapolis and Colorado Springs, but there's even probably 10, 15, 20 plus stackers who live in Indianapolis that I never see in the office because they are fully remote, even with an office close by.
Really, and I love. There's 2 things that I'm thinking as you're talking right now. I love how you call them stackers or form stackers. I mean, you've created a little bit of like this culture, this tribe of your employees, and it's a pride. It's a pride statement, I guess, is the best way I can say it. It's not like you say, oh, I'm an XYZ employee, but it's like an ownership. I'm a stacker. I'm a form stacker. I mean, it's like that. I think about here in Michigan. Whether you call yourself a Michigander or Michiganian, I don't know. There's 2 different words of saying it, but it's that same, like that pride of being a resident of the state of Michigan. I don't just live in Michigan. I am a Michigander. It's like an ownership type of a thing. Is that something as a part of your culture that's always been that way, Lindsay? And I know you said you joined the company about 2 years ago. So do you know the history of that, or?
I would say yes. We are very much a core-driven company. There's a lot of companies that will say like, oh, we really focus on our core values, but then you don't even really know what their core values are. Relationships matter is one that's really important to us, and that's always been the focus, to my knowledge, of FormStack, is that you need to treat everyone as a peer. You need to make strong relationships. You need to help other people succeed. And these are all pieces of our core values that I think, when you are in interviews with FormStack, by the end, when we have our final 2 or 3 candidates, at that point, we know they can all do the job. At that point, it's really figuring out who does align with these core benefits, these core values, and who's going to fit well and be a good representation of what our strong culture is. If you talk to anyone at FormStack, they'll say the culture and the people are what keeps me here. Yes, we have a great product. Yes, we're helping companies do amazing things. But at the end of the day, it's really the people that I rely on every day who make my job such a joy. That's
interesting. And as you were talking about that, I was kind of wondering, when you joined the company, what was your experience? Was it consistent with what you thought the company was going to be? And now kind of reflecting back 2 years in, is it the same? And while you're thinking about answering, I want to ask if any of Lindsay's coworkers are watching. And sometimes we have people that are kind of like the lurkers. I don't like to say, I don't know, lurkers even sounds like negative. It's like the readers, the people who are kind of watching, the viewers, right? If you guys are watching, you should leave a comment, guys or ladies. If you work with Lindsay and you're watching, please leave a comment and say hi, Lindsay, and I'll pop your comments up on screen. So tell me about that process, Lindsay. Was it consistent then with where you are now?
Yeah, it's blown away, I think, probably all of my expectations. It was a little weird at first because we were in transition as far as our location.
True, yeah.
Actually came into a new office almost 2 years ago. Now it'll be 2 years ago, or 2 years in February that we're in our new space. So we were in a transitional space for a while, and that was a little weird, but we were still the same form stack we've always been,
Mm-hmm.
Whether we remote or in person, there's just this camaraderie between us, and doing team lunches, and we play a game called Power Struggle, which we've obviously not been able to play for a really long time.
Now you got to tell us about that. What's Power Struggle? Sounds like it's a corporate game.
We are definitely opposite of than corporate. Essentially what it is, and I guess one thing that's funny is, you watch shows like Silicon Valley and you think like, that's not at all how a place could be. Like, that's not what it's like. And then you get a job in tech and you're like, wow, like it really is like,
it really is.
are that laid back and just that invested in having a good atmosphere and having a good culture and making work enjoyable and not just about work. But Power Struggle is our ping pong game, and you can play with as many people as you can fit around a ping pong table, which for us can be, when we have an all-team meeting we do every year, and we've had probably 20, 30 people stuck around a ping pong table.
Really? Yeah. It's a regular size ping pong table, right? Yeah. Like I think about Forrest Gump when I think about ping pong, like that size table.
Yeah, and then what happens is you go around in a circle and you volley like a normal ping pong game would be, but everything is game to bounce off or hit, unless it hits twice in a row. That's what kills a ball, and you get a point. Okay. 4 points. Once you have 4 points, you're out. But it's just a really fun game to get up and move around. And I think now that most people are working remote, you realize how easy it is just to sit, and it's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to not only build relationships and have fun and get a laugh in, but also like get moving, because if you're in those final like 3-4 slots, like you're gonna be moving around that table and you're getting like some good exercise and you're getting your steps in.
So do you drop out of the game if the ball goes out on your hit, or how do you? Is it a team game, or what's the rule?
No, individual game. So you're all playing just for yourself.
Okay.
And if the ball hits any surface twice in a row without hitting something else, then you get a point.
Okay.
And you got those 4 points, and that's when you're out of the game. Gotcha. So essentially, you're trying to get as few points as possible, and then the last two people battle it out, normal ping pong.
Okay, so which is kind of an interesting. It's almost like a reflection upon society as well, because there's some societies in the world that are, what do they call them, more community-based, and I might be using the wrong terms. If you guys know what I'm talking about, drop it in comments. But there's like the community-based society, and then there's the individualistic society, where individualistic is we work for ourselves. We're kind of just out for ourselves, and the community-based is like we work as a team. We work together for the greater good of society. And I'm probably not doing a great job. I'm not what do they call that? Not ecology, philosophy. What's the study of human behavior?
Anthropology.
Anthropology. I'm not an anthropologist, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And I read somewhere the other day, when you can't think of the word, you should say, what's the word in English again? So then people think you're bilingual. Not that you can't remember what the word is. I'm going to start doing that. But I like the whole the concept of it's using a game that we all know and play, but you kind of modified the rules a little bit, and it sounds like it's fun. It's getting some exercise, and you probably have a lot of laughs when you're playing that game too.
Well, it's funny you bring up the kind of community versus individual aspect, because you really can play it either way, because you can help people. There's no rule that only the person who is at that end of the table play it. So anyone can help or hurt people. And we always laugh about how, with every help, there's a hurt too. So you kind of have to make decisions and figure out at the time, like, am I going to be their friend? Am I going to be their foe? Am I going to help? So
yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of a fun way of getting out and stretching your legs. And when you made me think about, sitting at your desk, and now that we're all kind of working from home, you can kind of sit at your desk for so many hours a day, and it even blurs the lines between personal and work, because we don't have that commute that is in the middle of that kind of creates that separation. So it's really easy. I don't know about you, Lindsay, but it's really easy, like to kind of, I'm like, okay, I'll work until 5 and then I'll go make dinner and then I'll come back in my office again because it's like right here and everybody's still in the house and I escape from them a little bit. But are you making breaks in your day to keep you productive and active, or do you schedule those in? How do you kind of work that process?
Yeah, I try to just mentally do it. The way I try to track it myself is anytime I get through my drink, that means I need to get up, I need to walk, I need to, fix my tea or get my drink ready, or we have a soda stream that I use all the time. So that's my mental trigger of when it's time to get up, because I am definitely one of those people where I can sit down in the morning and I can just stay huddled in my zone for like 6 hours straight. I might get up to the restroom and that's about it. So I've been really trying to use my water intake as my okay, now you need to
I like that.
And walk away, and maybe I have 2 dogs, and so maybe go pet the dogs for a bit. But even Formstack, we're a big Slack community.
Are you? Okay.
Oh my gosh, we have probably 500 million Slack channels. But because most of us are remote, it's just the way that we keep in contact. And we actually use we have one channel called Water Cooler where all of our employees are in and we can just all chat and kind of get to know each other and randomly talk about things. And we actually have some automated workflows that will trigger a message every few hours like, hey, Formstackers, now's the time to take a break, whether you stretch or go pet a dog or go for a short walk. So that's also been really helpful to kind of I'm human, I'm not a robot.
Right. Well, that's an important part. And we're here, if you're joining us a little bit late and you didn't catch the topic, we're talking today about, and we're kind of going around a little bit on this too, but we're talking about employee engagement and culture of organizations around the topic of digital agility and kind of understanding there's this tech revolution that has happened. It's been happening and it's probably been increased in terms of what's been happening because of COVID, but the tech revolution that empowers employees. And what I'm feeling is a common theme coming out of this conversation is an employee-centric environment and a focus on culture. Because you don't have your manager standing over you anymore saying, what are you working on today, Lindsay? And did you get that project done? I mean, they can Slack you or email you or text you and ask that same thing, but there has to be this level of trust and there has to be this intrinsic motivation that occurs now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even with our website project, of course, the brand side of it was to go to market with a new beautiful brand and to really tell our story in a new way now that we have this full platform story. But really at the core of it, it was to empower the content team, because before we were on an entirely self-coded website that I would need to go be like, hey, Jason, can you do this update for me? Hey, Matt, can you fix this?
Yeah.
Because I don't have those coding skills. I'm not a developer. And the choice to go with Webflow and to do our website this way was to empower all of my content queens, is what we call ourselves, content queens, to be able to go and self-manage all of our own work, because we're the ones producing the content, and it just didn't make efficient sense to have another person in the mix to have to be like, oh, there's a typo here, or this link is now broken, or XYZ. If you live in the website world, you know how many things can go wrong. Now to be able to have the power, if I see something, I can just go in and fix it and update it, and it's live, and it's just it's magic. It's great.
Yeah. You're not relying upon those layers of approvals or, I remember back in the day, it was like you had to submit something to the marketing department or the IT department, and then you'd get in the queue of all the other requests they'd have, and then they would kind of prioritize, and you'd have to go to your manager if it was like a client site, it needs to be pushed up to the top of the list. Whereas now you can just kind of go in and do it yourself, right? You have your own login to get into the site and you can make that change yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just completely changes how you think about doing your processes and doing your work, and just being able to self-manage, self-solution is just so powerful. And to have something that's no code and be able just to magically make it yourself, and it's live and it's working and you can test things in a live environment. I mean, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And I'm thinking there's probably some folks watching here today, Lindsay, that are like, no, we're not doing that. We have all of our website operations centralized, or our digital processes are all centralized, and that goes through marketing or IT, or maybe there's a digital team that's doing that. But maybe you're causing them to think about that a little bit different now. And they're starting to think about, maybe we do need to empower our employees. So what advice do you have for those folks maybe if they're going from a very centralized, controlled process to thinking about engaging their employees, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think the best place, well, there's two places to start. One is to always ask your employees, what are your challenges? What are your bottlenecks? What's keeping you from being more productive? What is sucking up your time? You know, most of our FormStack customers, that's what they come back and tell us, just, you have saved us so much time by automating all these things and not having to chase paper or chase people or have to go through 18 levels of approval. You know, I can get in a FormStack, make this form, there you go. So I think first off is just talking to your employees and your coworkers and even your manager or your team and asking what is keeping you from achieving your goals. You know, what's a lofty goal you've wanted to put on your sheet for, you know, Q4, but you never have because XYZ is taking up all of your time. So kind of getting a concept of that and understanding what might be a challenge or a barrier to getting to that next level. And then secondly, I'm such an advocate for auditing your processes. You know, every 6 months to a year, really sitting down, mapping out what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, who's involved, what you need to do. Because, you know, we're humans. We like comfort. We like things that are, you know, a pattern or a process. We know what we're doing. And it's hard sometimes to make a realization that, like, well, it's not quite broken, but it's not the best.
Right.
So you just being able to take the time to really sit down and look at the things you're doing and ask yourself, is there a way to optimize this? Is there a way to simplify this? Is there a way to condense something or remove, you know, an approval or a step? We actually have Dr. Mark Walcott from University of Houston on Ripple Effect next week, kind of going over that whole entire thing of, well, how do you simplify business processes so you don't get stuck in these like legacy processes that you think are the right thing to do, but in reality, you're just wasting your time or your resources or your money. You know, there's a better way to do it if you just take a step back and look at the big picture and be like, oh, wow, you know, I could do X, Y, Z instead.
Yeah, and I heard the expression, it's like one of the most dangerous phrases in business is, this is the way we've always done things, or this is the way things have always been done. You know, like that methodology, that way of thinking can hold you back. Because sometimes it's not just the you know, the end process, but it's like, what are you trying to achieve from that? And you've never really rethought the process through. So I love your thought there of doing an audit of the process. Do you recommend doing that audit yourself or having somebody from another team or another department or an external resource doing that process for you?
Really, you can go in any direction. It really just depends on your team, your capacity, your resources. You know, a lot plays into those decisions. But I would always advocate, if you are doing it more on a low scale, having yourself plus someone else, because their perspective is just going to be so different, especially if there's someone from outside the process. That's what I always advocate for. So they're going to come in with completely fresh eyes, no context, no experience. They're just a clean slate. So they can come in and think of things that really maybe they've never thought about before, or you've never thought about before to do.
Yeah, they don't have that emotional attachment to things too, right? Like that, the history of things. And well, we went through that process. That was a really difficult process of updating the website. I don't want to go through that again. So there's a history over there where you might be looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes and going, the website's outdated. It's not responsive. It doesn't work well at all on mobile, or, you know, the functionality, it's like I have to get 5 clicks in to do what I need to do. And it's just not very intuitive in that process too, right?
Exactly. Yes. Having someone from that kind of external capacity is just always so helpful because, you know, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. No, it's a very important thing to think about. And that's why it's like, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that are happening nationally right now about diversity and inclusion and including people with different backgrounds and different than our own, because there are, we all bring in, you know, our backgrounds, experiences into the process. And if you're having a team that's pretty similar approaching the situation, they're all going to have similar, you know, that group think into the process. Whereas you bring people with different processes, and I even think about, there's been companies over the years where they launched a product and it was like an entirely male team who launched the product. And then, you know, they like something went out and it was the name. It was like, it meant something to women that was different than what it meant to men. And somebody's like, why wasn't there a woman involved in this who said, hey, have you thought about this? It was like glaring when it went out, and the public reaction was like, oh my gosh, we got to change this up. But having different people without those backgrounds, with different perspectives that you can think about and consider into that process, right?
Yeah, and that's why it is so nice to have the ability to hire outside, Indiana, outside the US, because we do bring in such different perspectives. And we actually brought in a diversity and inclusion hiring specialist named Hannah. I think she's been here about a year or so. And she really helps us focus on how do we bring in those varying perspectives, but also how do we make them feel welcome throughout the whole interview process and the onboarding. And I did a really interesting piece that kind of highlights her thinking in that realm and why it's such an important piece to any organization. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on someone's website, gone to look at their executive leadership, and they're like carbon copies. And you're like, oh.
It's so funny. I was on I think it was Detroit Economic Club. I was on a virtual meeting with them earlier today, and we were talking about diversity and inclusion because there's so many things happening. And I'm so happy to hear the national conversation is shifting, and we're having these conversations, very candid conversations. But we talk about the same thing. You get these messages coming out from the CEO of the company that talks about, here's our stance on diversity and inclusion, and here's our statement on Black Lives Matter or Breonna Taylor or, any of these, George Floyd, or anything else that's happening in the national conversation right now. And you go to their website, right? And you're like looking at their leadership team, and there's a lack of diversity in place, or they hire a diversity officer, and that's the first person who is diverse on their team. So they're moving in the direction, but let's make sure that there are actions that are backing those things up. To your point, that they're not all similar looking in terms of skin color, gender, et cetera, right, Lindsay?
Yeah, and that's one thing that's great. If you look at our team pictures from Converge, which is our all team meeting when we luckily get to meet somewhere together in person and get to really focus on those relationships. I mean, it's just such a diverse, different group that's coming together, and to be able to talk to people from Poland and from Brazil and to learn about their cultures and their foods. Like last time it was in Mexico, and I came down a few days early to bond with about a group of 10 staffers, and Marcella was there, and she lives in Argentina. So I got to learn about her culture and like, what do you eat for dinner and what's your schedule like? And just to have that is just so fulfilling as a human. And to make those connections and to see that and how that impact your work on a day-to-day. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's great to like expand our insights and our horizons and our points of view and perspectives just by talking to people different than we are. So speaking of talking to people, I've added a comment below, and I would love it for you guys that are watching, whether you're watching this on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, if you could join us in the conversation. Come along in the conversation if you can. So maybe there's something we talked about earlier about culture or about digital awareness or something, website enhancements, website updates. Join us in that conversation. And I'm going to start to pull some of your comments and questions up on screen. And I see this was something that came in earlier from Pamela English, and I think Pamela's up in Metro Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. But she's saying everyone is going to work in Indiana, right? And I'm not sure if she's asking about what are the state of things, but I'm going to ask the question. Are people, what is the environment like in Indianapolis right now? Lindsay, are things starting to open back up? Is everybody still working from home? Where's your market at right now?
It's very different depending on the organization you're at, I think. There are definitely some organizations that are bringing their people back to work. Our office has been open maybe a month or two now, but we've had very strict health protocols to follow. Erin, our office manager, has been a rock star of being able to communicate effectively on what we need to do and why we need to do it and why it's important. But I think it just is really about which organization you're at, about what they're recommending. Actually, a lot of Indianapolis businesses have 100% said you're working from home through 2021, the beginning of 2021. I think it just depends where you're at, what their kind of thoughts are on that. We are entering stage 5 from Marion County standpoint. But it's just I live in Indianapolis. I work in Fishers, which is a suburb of Indianapolis, not very far away. But even just the differences between Indianapolis and Fishers of what has been the regulation and when and what is different. So I think it really depends where you're at. For us, we've been open maybe a month or two, but again, with very, very, very heavy precautions and lots of safety measures.
It's kind of, I like having conversations with people like you, Lindsay, who are in different places. I'm in Metro Detroit, which is in Michigan. We're in the Midwest. Lindsay, and for those of you watching who may not be familiar, Lindsay is in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is like just one state south of Michigan, south into the West, if I'm thinking correctly about this. So we're fairly close by. We're in the same time zone. But here in the U.S., I mean, you go from state to state and restrictions are a little bit different. And I'm hearing like things in Florida are really opening up right now, which is a little surprising because you hear what's happening with the virus and cases and things like that. In other places, they're much more restrictive. And I think we're all kind of getting to the point, like we understand why things are happening, Lindsay, but people have different thresholds for tolerance of how much we're being allowed to be out there and whether we're wearing masks or not. And it's all, I mean, this isn't ideal. For none of us, this is ideal. We want our kids back in school. We want our businesses back open up. We want to be back to normal, but we're also hearing a lot of conversation. Well, normal's not normal anymore. It's going to be a different form of normal. And we have other people that are watching close to me, and Lisa's an example. She's still working from home. We're in the middle of the day here, so she's having lunch. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us here. And I want to share a couple of additional comments as well. And I think there might be an additional question or two in here too. Paul is saying, so true. When you give employees the freedom and trust to do their jobs, you would be amazed at productivity. And Lindsay, you could probably speak to that. I would guess throughout your career, you probably had some companies that are more trusting of their employees, and then others that are a little bit more restrictive. And think about and maybe comment on, productivity levels and what you've seen at those types of organizations.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about this from the writer perspective.
Yeah.
Anyone who works in any type of content or marketing development knows, like, you really have to have that thick skin because you're going to have an editor come in and it might not be exactly what you're expecting when you get that back. But there's also this relationship between whoever is going to be your editor or your manager or your boss or the approval, whatever you want to put in that role. They need to set the expectations for you so you can fulfill on those expectations. So I've definitely been in situations where I thought I was 100% fulfilling what this editor wanted, and then them come back and be like, redlined everything. And you're like, there's something wrong here. Like, something's missing here. What is this? What is this? So I think as a content marketer, having that trust between your manager, your editor, and your team is so crucial. And to be able to learn from that over time too. So your editor, whether that's you editing someone else's work or yours, you can learn from that over time and not have to have that continual struggle between, content creator and editor. Because man, if there's a bad relationship there or there's miscommunication, I mean, that will just degrade everything.
Yeah.
And no one ends up happy.
Well, and it hinders your desire to want to do things, right? If you're feeling like they're not going to like it anyways, it's never going to be right. So why am I going to put forward my best work? Yes. Because it's not going to be what they want, regardless of what I do. I can't do right. I can't do wrong. I mean, it's all wrong, right? It's that perspective.
Yes, 100%. And I have to give my manager Abby a shout out because she has always set the floor that no question is a dumb question. Just clarify, ask it. Let's get it out of the way.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a great manager. I hope Abby's watching. Abby, if you are, give us a shout out. And maybe not. If she's not watching because she's busy, maybe share the link with her later, or we'll try to tag her in the video. Because I always love when people I'm interviewing, when they talk about their team members and their employees. And sometimes I have people that are like, I didn't want to tell them I was doing this live, either because they were nervous. They're like, I don't know how it's going to go. Or, well, I don't work in marketing or public relations, and I don't want someone saying, well, why is Lindsay on? Why isn't it so-and-so in the other department? But it sounds like your company is very open and welcoming of different perspectives. And I think that reflects very positively on your company culture there.
Yeah, I mean, we're real advocates of our employees being our brand.
Yeah.
We actually have a whole entire social media training strategy that Lindsay Adams, another Lindsay on the content team, and she's an AY too. Anyways, that Lindsay Adams has been working on to really help our employees buff up their personal brand because they are an extension of FormStack. So we're huge advocates that as long as you know our narrative, you know our product, and you know kind of our, I don't want to say pitch, but essentially our pitch, we trust you to be able to go out and be a brand advocate for us and be a marketer for us. And we're not so tightly wound into that, these are our 4 people who can talk about FormStack.
Right, that's it.
Reach
right.
out to the PR team otherwise. No, we trust our employees that you will know FormStack. You are FormStack. So you can then go out and, share the word about who we are, what we are, and what we do.
Yeah, good point. So, Paul, I want to say, Paul, you're like my favorite person of the day because I love when I see questions and comments and things that are coming in. And Paul just, he was commenting earlier on some other topics, and then he just asked a question. So thank you, Paul. I really appreciate it. This is a little tip for you guys. Whenever you're watching a panel, like always try to think of like, what's one question I could ask the panelists? And whether you're on a Zoom or you're in a live session, like try to think of one question. It makes the moderator feel good. It's making me feel good. It's making Lindsay feel good because she's like, people are paying attention. They have, value. They're gaining that from, and it's making her feel good. But it helps to kind of add to the conversation, because this isn't just me and Lindsay talking. It's like, I want to make sure this is of value to all of you as well. So it helps to keep you guys engaged. So Paul has a question on employers that are teleworking. A lot of bosses think that they need to see you in order to be to trust that they're doing your job. So Lindsay, what is your advice for folks like that might have some issues with the teleworking?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next in our world, because I think the lid has been lifted on what is possible when it comes to remote work and teleworking. We've all seen that everything shut down and everyone was sent home and everyone was still able to do their job for the most part. Of course, there's always those essential roles that cannot function from their own home. But for the most part, for the office worker, I'll say, I think this has really revealed that remote work is a powerful thing. I mean, if you want to improve the health of your employees, improve the happiness, be able to have them have a better work-life balance, I mean, remote really is the way to go, or being able to bounce back and forth like we are between being in an office and being remote. I think it's a really powerful benefit, really. I mean, it is an employee benefit to be able to be remote, and our employees can, well, not a COVID world, but you want to go and spend a few weeks in like New Zealand, or you want to go and see your brother in, California, or whatever it might be, you can do that and not have to take, 3 weeks of vacation that, you might want to use otherwise to do other things. You can still work and be where you want, when you want. So it's really just a huge benefit. It should always be seen as a benefit. And as far as concerning the like, oh, are they getting work done? I mean, you can see when your employees are doing work. You're going to be getting email alerts, you're going to get Slack alerts. We use Monday for our project management. You're going to be tagged on Monday. Like, you're still going to see the gears turning and the wheels turning. It's just in a different way.
Right.
So again, it's just that different perspective, seeing things in a different light and coming into it, pitching it as a positive. That's what I would suggest. Just showing the benefits of it, finding some research that proves the health benefits, both from a physical and mental standpoint. I mean, if you look up what commuting does to people, if it's
oh my gosh, yeah.
cool. No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, I mean, we've all been kind of exposed to a different type of a working environment, and we've had to figure out how to make it work. And I think we're all kind of eager to get back once it's safe to do so. But there may be a different back, when we are back, there might be more back and forth, like we're seeing right now, which is a nice thing to see. So as we start to kind of wrap up the conversation here today, Lindsay, I want to pull up your LinkedIn profile up on screen for those that are kind of watching us online on LinkedIn. And I've got her LinkedIn URL below. Lindsay Laterout, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Laterout, close. Yeah.
Laterout. Okay, I should have asked. A little learning experience for me. I should have asked before we got on the session here today. And we were actually in our pre-show, we were having this conversation, and I said, did you get married recently? And I just didn't notice it when you booked it at the time. And we were talking about how women, we have like these two names. We have our maiden name and our married name. And, some people put their maiden name on their LinkedIn and some people don't. And you were kind of commenting like, this was your maiden name, right? In your LinkedIn URL, and you just never changed it on your profile, right?
Yeah. Actually, my personal emails, I still use my maiden name in some sort of fashion, just kind of to keep it a piece of me, Yeah.
See, these are things that guys don't have to worry about, and I appreciate. I mean, I changed mine. I was Zawacki before I became Meller, so it's much easier to spell now. But it's a big change. You got to change it at the, your driver's license and all these other. Then you got to go. Now we got to do social media. We got to change our Twitter, our LinkedIn, like all these other places. But at any rate, Lindsay, so I've shown your profile. Let me point in the right direction. Showing your profile up on screen here. Are you open to accepting invitations from people that are watching the show here today?
Yes, would love to.
Okay. And I always tell people too, if you do want to connect with Lindsay, please make sure you mention that that you watched the show today. And if there was something particularly helpful that Lindsay shared, mention that in your invitation to connect with her. If there's something that she kind of was touching on and you said, hey, that's an interesting point to make, that I was memorable about your interview, mention that in there, because I think that's more likely to help them to remember where you saw them and where you kind of came across them first. And I'll give the floor to you now, Lindsay, too, as we start to wrap here for today. Any final comments you'd like to offer, tips on digital agility or the tech revolution, shout outs you want to give, anything else you guys are working on or things we should know about FormStack?
Yeah, I think as far as digital agility, it's just doing the research and, like I said, doing those audits and figuring out where can you simplify and where can you break down really complicated, complex, dev-heavy processes and figure out the ways that you can really retool it, rethink it, or skill your employees in ways that they can be empowered to kind of build those things themselves and not have to reach out to 2, 3, 4, 5 different people across 2 or 3 departments. Just being able to do those things on your own is just so fulfilling, and you'll see it reflected in the happiness of your employees and the satisfaction scores that HR produces and things like that. But if you want to learn more about kind of this no tech revolution and learn more about this digital agility, I highly recommend listening to Ripple Effect. Season 2 is all about digging into how can we make the pivots we need to make in the atmosphere we're living in now, and being able to digitize things, but not in a way that adds complexity, but actually in a way that makes them simpler and easier to understand and easier to process, change, tweak, adapt. Because I think that's ideally what we're all after. We don't want something that's dragging us down. We want something that is going to be able to be more efficient, be more productive, get us to the next goal, that next quarter, whatever that next thing is on your list to do.
And you mentioned Ripple Effect, so I'm trying to kind of multitask and pull it up in the background here. But can you tell people, if in case they join us a little bit late, what is Ripple Effect? That's your podcast?
So actually, if you go here and click resources, and podcast will be an option under that drop-down bar.
Oh, okay, very cool. So we could just go on formstack.com and then click on resources, and then it's podcast right here.
Yeah, so this was actually launch of our season 2. We had Tara Reid, who is the CEO of Apps Without Code, and she really talks about how digital agility can be something that everyone can access through no-code apps and no-code tools. But yeah, Effect is our podcast. Chris Byers, our CEO, is the host, and he's phenomenal. I could listen to Chris talk probably for 4 hours straight and not get bored, because he is just a really phenomenal host.
Mm-hmm.
We have people from all over the country as guests, and they're all talking about how you can use tech to better your processes, your employees, your happiness, your work-life balance, all of those things. One episode I highly recommend is Miranda Nicholson. She's our SVP of Human Resources, and she really digs into how to keep yourself healthy as you're transitioning into remote work. So that's a really relevant one right now.
Okay.
And Catherine as well, our SVP of Marketing, came on as a bonus episode a while back, and she talks more about that digital agility and why it's important. And then the last one I'll highlight actually is Aday's right there. He's actually the founder of FormStack.
Okay.
And he came on with Chris to have a really, really, really eye-opening conversation about systemic racism. It's probably this podcast and the blog posts I wrote off this podcast are probably the most impactful pieces of content I've ever done in my life.
That's awesome. Well, I'm actually gonna grab that, and I'll drop it into the LinkedIn comments to make it a little bit easier for people to find this podcast series, but also this episode, because there's so many conversations happening right now about systemic racism. I think it's such an important topic, and we all need to educate ourselves, because there is unconscious bias that's occurring, and part of this, we just need to be open to new viewpoints, and we need to be open into learning, right? And to having some candid conversations about this as well. So awesome. Well, Lindsay, this has been such a delight. And now I know you're a Slack expert too. I'm going to call you that, because you use Slack for work. You use Slack for Together Digital as well. So if I have any Slack questions in the future, I may message you on Slack and ask you some, because I'm kind of new to Slack. I got into it when I joined the Detroit chapter of Together Digital. I'm still kind of a newbie. And I'm just going to give a quick shout out. I'm not sure if she's still watching it, but Melanie is one of my fellow Detroit Together Digital members. So she's up here in this area. But I may reach out to you, if you don't mind, Lindsay, with questions on Slack if I have some in the future.
Yeah, of course. And I have an article I actually wrote that I can send your way to.
Yeah, please do. That's awesome. I'm always open to learning. And I know where my blind spots are too, in terms of technology and not understanding those areas. So I'm not afraid to reach out and say, hey, I don't know this, and ask for help in that. So great to hear. All right, great. Well, this has been a great conversation today, Lindsay. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. What's next for you? What's after the interview today? What are you doing next for the afternoon?
It's website work. So we're still putting on, the final touches, final tweaks as we really get this website 100% and just ready to go. But, content development as a content manager, that part never ends.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, yeah, websites always have. And I just saw, as you were talking, I was like, uh-oh, I just saw Paul saying live may have locked up. He's saying it's locked up on his screen. Mine still is showing that it's streaming. So if it did lock up by any reason, the playback on YouTube will still be continuous. So I'll make sure to share that out. And that's kind of the benefit of technology when we're streaming to multiple places. If there's a hiccup one place, we can always pull it from some other place and kind of keep things going along in there. So awesome. Well, thank you, Lindsay, for your time and your insights today. And a delight seeing you online. And hopefully we'll get the chance to meet in person at some point in the future, too.
Yeah, same. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to ask you to do two things, if you could, before you leave this live session here today. And one is, as soon as you're done watching the video, come back into the video and click on share. Share this video with someone in your network. Maybe you could share it as a post on LinkedIn if you haven't posted this week on LinkedIn, or you can share it on Facebook or YouTube. Maybe message it to someone or email the link to someone who may be struggling with this whole concept of digital agility and empowering their employees. Maybe share it along with someone. And then also, I'd like to ask if you could please go to mellermarketing.com/subscribe. You can join my VIP email list where I send out LinkedIn strategy tips, and I also will let you know about upcoming interviews in this series. So that's it for us for today. This has been Brenda Meller with Meller Marketing, and Lindsey McGuire joining us from FormStack. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And everybody watching, have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you online again soon. Take care, everyone.